Hi, I'm Peter Chan, National Weather Service Program Lead of the Alaska Weather Show, and I have a very important change notice to share with you. The last TV broadcast of the Alaska Weather Show in the traditional sense over the airwaves will be on Saturday, June 30th. Starting on July 1st and thereafter, the National Weather Service will provide a modified web-based version of the program on a new YouTube channel. So that means you'll be able to find us. We'll be moving from at AKwx TV to at NWS Alaska, and you can go ahead and subscribe to that channel now. There will be a public comment period from May 15th through July 30th, so please send your comments or concerns to nws.service-change-comments@noaa.gov. And if you have any other questions, you may reach carrie.haisley at noaa.gov and donald.moore@noaa.gov. Thank you for your patience and understanding.
Hello again, and thanks for joining us for this Sunday show. Up first, fire danger for grass is the forecast for Monday, June 19th. Tomorrow, improved here over the central interior. Just a lot of medium with some areas of high fire danger here down in the northern Kuskokwim Valley, and lost the extreme that we had yesterday for today, actually up in the Yukon Flats. It was forecast for today. Now for tomorrow, just forecasting quite an area of very high fire danger again for grass, and continuing to improve there up along the western north slope. And increasing here due to the recent sunshine, dry conditions. Again, for grass, got some high to very high fire danger for that over the Susitna Valley and the western Kenai Peninsula. It looks like here in the Kuskokwim Valley as well. Otherwise, low Yukon, the Kuskokwim Delta into Bristol Bay, Kodiak Island up to medium. And not too bad here for the Copper River Basin and the southeast coast. And for spruce, very high fire danger in the Yukon Flats, where always seems to be the worst fire danger up there, and medium, or high, I'm sorry, high in the central interior here north of the Alaska Range, and even some high fire danger for spruce, now the western Kenai Peninsula, on up into Anchorage and the southern Susitna Valley areas. Of course, all the blue showing low for fire danger for spruce. And so moving on from there, we can see a couple of systems here, one moving in from the west, slowly pushing a front and some moisture areas of light rain into the Seward Peninsula and clouds in toward the central interior. And another system coming up from the south, a little bit more moisture with it, moving in, bringing some rain at times today for the eastern Aleutians, along with some gale force winds, 35-knot winds there today, and in toward the Alaska Peninsula, some light rain there falling, and then kind of wrapping back into the Adak-Atka area. Clear skies to start there for the Pribilof Islands. There's those clouds earlier this morning, had clear skies there, sunshine, and then the clouds rolling in during the day today, but clear skies, Bristol Bay to Kodiak Island, sunshine, south central Alaska, Kenai Peninsula areas, and across the North Gulf Coast, and variably cloudy skies up over the upper and mid-Tanana Valley there, more westerly flow carrying some clouds eastward there, and drying out finally over toward Northway and Tok, Copper River Basin as well, drying out, and the Panhandle, same thing today, had some clouds early on, still lingering down over the southern areas, but a little bit drier and warmer today, and even warmer temperatures in store for Monday there across the southeast coast. Today on the chart, here's that front pushing the moisture areas of light rain, fog, drizzle from the western Arctic coast down across the Seward Peninsula, spreading into Norton Sound and trailing back across St. Lawrence Island there, and high pressure in between this front and the one coming up from the south, keeping it clear here. Actually a swath right across the Bering Sea there between the two systems with sunshine sunshine, again, Bristol Bay into the Kuskokwim Valley across south central Alaska. Some clouds here along the Alaska Range. Afternoon cumulus building over the mountainous terrain, actually here at the Kenai Peninsula, Chugach Mountains, Talkeetnas. But basically sunshine here along the North Gulf Coast, mostly sunny in the Panhandle, and some sun breaks, but more clouds up in the central interior here. And again, the rain pushing into the Alaska Peninsula tonight. That moisture pushes northeastward and starts to make landfall along the southwest coast, mostly Cape Newinham, maybe up toward southern Nunivak Island late tonight, early tomorrow morning. Periods of rain for the Alaska Peninsula, rain changing to showers for the eastern Aleutians, ending, drying out for the central Aleutians, so some clearing out toward Shemya. High pressure redeveloping back here to the west. This front really breaking up as it pushes eastward with just showers scattered along the frontal boundary, maybe some areas of light rain here along the Yukon River, mid and lower Yukon River Valley areas. Dry either side of that line, and mostly clear and light wind conditions. Southern, southeast Alaska, partly to mostly cloudy in the eastern interior areas, and dry conditions with light winds for the Panhandle. For tomorrow, some rain slides up into Kodiak Island from southwest to northeast. Light rain, that is. Same thing here for Bristol Bay. Some light rain moving in. The front kind of stalled out over the Alaska Peninsula, keeping it unsettled and damp there all the way back to the eastern Aleutians. Some rain pushing up, trying to get into the southern Yukon Delta, but whatever it does will be pretty light. Scattered showers along this trough axis up into the eastern interior areas, and areas of light rain here to the northwest, sunny for the Panhandle. And moving on to Tuesday, that high that redevelops over the western Bering shifts eastward a little bit, so that's going to make most of the Bering Sea pretty nice. Light winds, variably cloudy skies, areas of low clouds and fog, probably pretty widespread. Southeast Bering, Pribilofs down to the eastern Aleutians, those light wind conditions. Out here to the west, a stronger front bringing gale force winds into Shemya and Attu with rain, and some light rain spreading into the into Amchitka Island late in the day. Partly sunny, Adak and Atka, and light winds, mostly dry for the Alaska Peninsula. Some of that remnant moisture brings some showers into cloudy skies, showers, cooler temperatures into south central Alaska, and another sunny day for the southeast coast. And for the lows tonight in the 40s and 50s, or mostly in the 40s, most areas. Highs tomorrow, 70 to 80 for the southeast coast, mid-70s in the Copper River Basin, and upper 60s to mid-70s. Susitna, Madawaska Valley into the western Kenai Peninsula, mid-60s Kodiak Island. And for the lows, again, 40s to near 50, lower 50s, some areas of the Panhandle, Kodiak Island, followed by highs. Cooler, we're still in the 70s, pretty nice there, but cooler, south central Alaska, upper 50s to lower 60s, near 70, Copper River Basin, and near 60 for the Kuskokwim Valley. Otherwise, 60, 65 for Bristol Bay. Lows in the interior, 30s Arctic coast, Bering Strait, 40s to lower 50s elsewhere. Highs tomorrow, 60s, maybe some lower 70s here over toward the eastern part of the state there. Otherwise, 40s for the Seward Peninsula, near 40 for the Arctic coast. And lows, 30s for the Arctic coast, all the way down to St. Lawrence Island. 40s to lower 50s here, warmest around Fairbanks to Fort Yukon. Highs, upper 60s to lower 70s, central and eastern part of the interior, near 40 to maybe 51 for Dead Horse. And for the southwest coast, lows upper 30s to mid 40s, 40s for the Aleutians, followed by highs tomorrow, 45 to 50, except 50 to 55 for the southwest coast. And for the lows, about the same, in the 40s, lower 40s, followed by highs, upper 40s to mid 50s, with the mid 50s here for Cold Bay to Unalaska, near 50 for Adak.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Monday morning, best flying conditions will be here central interior to the east, on down the Gulf of Alaska, nothing but VFR. Also across the Panhandle, into Bristol Bay, Kodiak Island, right up along the southwest coast and the Nunivak Island. And that old front kind of stalled out right through here, keeping it IFR, St. Matthew Island, on up into the northern Norton Sound, Seward Peninsula area. More IFR, that southwest flow here, upsloping on the southern slopes of the Brooks Range. Downsloping makes it VFR for the north slope. Marginal VFR along areas of the Arctic coast. More IFR here with that moisture that's been coming northward from the Pacific into the southeast Bering Sea, covering Adak, Atka, eastern Aleutians, south side of the Alaska Peninsula. And we'll see for the afternoon, those two areas kind of merge out here. So most of the eastern Bering Sea and northern areas IFR. Marginal VFR for Adak, but Atka Island eastward all the way up now to Sitkinak and southwest Kodiak Island becoming IFR in the afternoon there. Some IFR sliding up to Cape Newnham, maybe Togiak Bay, and a little bit kind of improving here now over Norton Sound, but lingering IFR. They're around Nome on up toward Teller. And the IFR, those conditions look like it'll be mostly off the Arctic coast. Maybe some marginal VFR right along the east side there. Pretty good VFR in the interior, as well as the Panhandle. Good VFR into the Gulf of Alaska, Prince William Sound. And for Tuesday morning, increasing southwest flow here as the ridge pushes eastward. So some IFR now not making a big advance to the northeast here, covering just about all of Kodiak Island. And coming into the southwest interior a little bit there with marginal VFR sliding all the way up, almost into Denali Park. Good VFR, northern part of the state. A lot of IFR out over the Bering Sea. VFR, Susitna Valley, right on down across the Panhandle to Dixon Entrance. And for the afternoon, some marginal VFR breaks off and slides up to the northeast here into the northern Susitna Valley and looks like into the mid-Tanana Valley. IFR now pushing up into Prince William Sound, south side of the Kenai Peninsula, and at least some distance into Resurrection Bay. IFR, southwest Kodiak Island, and the Pacific side of the Alaska Peninsula. VFR Bristol Bay, southwest coast, Nunivak Island, improving out over the Bering Sea, mostly marginal there. Next batch IFR just coming onto the map there into Shimian at 2. IFR Bering Strait, and looks like into the central Arctic coast. Anatuvik, lowest conditions both for Anatuvik and Atigan will be in the morning hours, improving throughout the day. And same thing for Atigan, and then Lake Clark and Merrill, VFR again for Monday. Monday looking good for rainy as well. Windy, another VFR day coming up there. And the eastern Alaska Range, Isabel, Mentasta, good VFR. And another VFR day for Tanita, no change for Portage, VFR flying there, and Chilkoot and White, VFR. Freezing levels, again, cold upper low there over the Chukchi Sea, so we got 2,000 to 4,000 feet or so over the northwest interior, 6,000 feet just south of St. Lawrence Island, and then warmer conditions here over the southern Bering Sea, about 8,000 to 10,000 feet, 10,000 feet across Kodiak Island into the Gulf of Alaska, and 8,000 feet for the Panhandle and southeast interior. And for icing, a couple of areas of possible light, isolated, moderate rime icing sliding eastward here across the eastern Arctic coast, north slope. Another weak band here coming onshore to the west. And then possible icing here of, again, very isolated, moderate rime icing, southwest coast to the Pribilofs, and a couple of more areas here over the Alaska Peninsula. Really minimal as far as icing goes in any of these areas. And for the jet stream, we've got southwest or west-southwest flow, about 100 knots coming into the central interior, up and over the top of this ridge, northerlies, maybe 60, 65 knots coming across the northern Panhandle. And for 9,000 feet, southwest 40 for the Alaska Peninsula, even stronger west 55-knot winds blowing right in toward Kotzebue. And for 3,000 feet, 40-knot winds coming across the Bering Strait out of the Russian Far East, and maybe 30 to 40-knot winds there southwest of Kodiak Island. Otherwise, pretty light and variable everywhere else. Turbulence-wise, moderate turbulence possible. Alaska Peninsula, Aleutian Range, but more likely here northern Seward Peninsula on up along the northwest coast into the western Brooks Range area. Otherwise, pretty smooth elsewhere.
It's the rhythm of our everyday life. We're more dependent on satellite and communication systems than at any other time in history. Disruptions can affect our economy and even our safety. To prepare for the effects of such events and minimize impacts, we need to look outside our atmosphere, some 93 million miles away, at a star we call the Sun. It's our main energy source. It warms the Earth and grows our food. While the Sun and the space between may seem pleasant from our perspective, it's anything but peaceful. At its surface exists a chaotic state of eruptions and radiation. And unlike Vegas, what happens at the Sun doesn't stay at the Sun.
Space weather is essentially emissions from the Sun, radiation, magnetic field that erupts from the solar surface, pumped out into space, sometimes right towards Earth. When it impacts the Earth, it impacts our technology. That's what we call space weather.
These solar events and their effects at Earth can disrupt systems we take for granted. From causing blackouts to the power grid, to delaying offshore drilling operations due to inaccurate GPS data. Interference with communication systems can force air traffic to reroute and impact rescue response and coordination. Outside our atmosphere, solar radiation can harm astronauts and the systems they depend on. The good news is that these eruptions can be detected early. Forecasters at the NOAA Space Weather Prediction Center in Boulder, Colorado, have their eyes on the Sun at all times.
The Space Weather Prediction Center is part of the National Weather Service and is very much like a normal weather forecast office. We're here 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We're looking at data, we're looking at imagery, we're looking at model outputs. As conditions develop, we put out alerts, warnings, and watches of imminent activity to our customers so they can take action.
In many ways, forecasting space weather is a lot like forecasting hurricanes. Those who rely on space weather forecasts, like electric power grid managers, are informed early on and can begin taking protective action.
When we see an eruption on the Sun, space weather forecasters will issue a watch. And this is much like a hurricane watch. When a hurricane sits offshore of Miami, for example, perhaps 48 hours out, we too can see way in advance that something may be coming towards the Earth.
As the storm moves toward us, it hits a monitoring spacecraft orbiting 1 million miles away from Earth.
It's kind of our buoy sitting out there offshore, and that hurricane about 30, 45 minutes before it makes landfall, we'll get the measurements from the buoy. That's what this spacecraft does for us. That big eruption that left the Sun hits the spacecraft. Now we've got the measurements of exactly what's going to impact us here on Earth, and we issue the warnings to give the power grid a heads up that the storm is now imminent. An interesting element to this whole process is that when the forecasters issue the alert, the power grid receives the alert, takes the necessary actions to protect the grid, and the average citizen never knows anything ever happened.
The number of customers who rely on space weather information continues to grow. As our reliance on technology increases, so will our need for constant monitoring of the Sun.
Space weather affects technologies. As conditions develop, we put out alerts, warnings, and watches to our customers so they can take action.
GPS has changed society. Most people don't realize how remarkable and how many different applications there are.
the GPS has become an integral part, not just of our daily lives as far as cell phones and guidance for our cars and mapping, but the whole system in agriculture is really relying heavily on high accuracy GPS.
So they're using GPS to plant those seeds with centimeter accuracy, and then they can come behind it and irrigate and fertilize right where that seed is with that 1 centimeter accuracy.
The GPS creates a line for the operator that he can steer along, or you go to another level and the operator doesn't steer anymore and the tractor has an automatic steering system on it, much like a cruise control on a car, except for when I push the button, it doesn't drive a set speed. When I push a button, it stays on a predefined line.
You don't even need lights. You can do it at nighttime. You program your GPS and it's driving that tractor for you. So it's huge, and it's changing the way that the farmers farm the fields.
6 or 7 days out.
There's an interest in GPS applications from space weather side because when the sun is eruptive, it causes GPS to falter, and in some cases it doesn't work at all.
Productivity may suffer to a certain degree in that there's no way that I as a human being can steer as good 8 hours a day as a GPS system's going to do. It's going to be the same all day long. Some of the other application technologies, those are going to be gone. We're not going to have the ability to do good section control on sprayers and planters and fertilizer applicators without GPS.
We see a huge growing customer base in so many different industries, so many different sectors now relying on GPS and high precision GPS. They're all big customers for us.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Coastal water forecast for the southern panhandle along the coast. Northwest winds 20 knots for Monday. Central coast here, northwest at 15. And then variable winds 10 knots for the north coast. Variable winds north winds at 10 knots also for Lynn Canal Glacier Bay area. Northwest at 10 for Stevens Passage. Seas up in these areas about 2 feet. And Clarence Strait looking at a north wind of 15 knots with 3-foot seas. For the day Tuesday, now south wind in Lynn Canal, northern inner channels at about 10 knots, northwest 10 for Stevens Passage, and northwest of 15 for Clarence Strait. Small craft advisories now coming onto the south coast with those northwest winds picking up to 25 knots. Seas building up to about 8 feet. West-northwest 15 here for the central coast, and then westerlies 10 to 15 knots with 4 to 5 foot seas for the north coast. For Cook Inlet tomorrow, Monday, south to southwesterlies at 20, southwest 20 also on the forecast for Kamishak Bay, seas at about 5 feet, and west winds 25 knots for the Barren Islands. Same thing for the western North Gulf Coast, seas running 5 to 6 feet in both areas. Light variable winds for Prince William Sound, and variable winds 10 to 15 knots for the eastern North Gulf Coast. And then for Tuesday, Prince William Sound, southeast winds at 10 knots. Variable winds at 10 knots for the North Gulf Coast. They'll seas down to 3 to 4 feet. And for Cook Inlet, south to southwest breeze at 15 knots, seas 4 feet. Southeast 15 for both the Barren Islands here, right into Kamishak Bay, seas only at 4 feet. For the Alaska Peninsula tomorrow, east and southeast winds 20 to 25 knots. And for Bristol Bay, small craft advisories there for southeasterlies at 25, but seas only 3 feet. And for Shelikof Strait, actually all around Kodiak Island, winds will be southwest at 20 knots. And for the day on Tuesday, Kodiak Island, variable to south winds 10 to 15 knots. Light variable winds for the Alaska Peninsula, and for Bristol Bay, looking at northeasterlies at 10 knots and slight seas. Eastern Aleutians, east to northeast winds, 15 to 25 knots for the day Monday, north at 20 knots for the central Aleutians. Western Aleutians, north to northeast winds at 15 to 20 knots with seas running 5 to 7 feet. And then gale warnings with that next stronger front coming in toward the western Aleutians there. Southeast winds will increase to 35 knots throughout the day Tuesday, seas building to 10 to 12 feet. And then small craft advisories here for Amchitka Island and for Adak and Atka, northeast at 20. And for the eastern Aleutians, north winds 10 to 20 knots with seas at about 5 to 7 feet. For the southwest coast, south of Nunivak Island, winds will be northeast at 15 knots. Yukon Delta coast, north at 10. Light winds, light variable winds here for St. Lawrence Island and Norton Sound. And for St. Matthew Island, north at 15, seas 4 feet, northeast at 20. For the Pribilofs, with 5-foot seas. And for Tuesday, St. Paul and St. George, looking at north winds at 20 knots, seas 5 feet. St. Matthew Island, southwest at 20. For the southwest coast here, north winds 15 to 20 knots, strongest south of Nunivak Island, and then north winds at 10 knots for St. Lawrence Island, and west at 10 for Norton Sound. Those seas at about 3 feet. And for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, kind of variable winds at 10 knots, so pretty light winds there all the way to the central coast. Picking up to south at 15 for the western Arctic coast. Chukchi Sea, 15 to 25 knot winds from the south with 4 to 5 foot seas. And for the day Tuesday, for the Chukchi Sea, mostly small craft advisories, south to southwest winds 20 to 25 knots. Small craft advisories for the western Arctic coast, winds out of the west at 25 knots. Southwest winds 20 knots for the central coast. And for the east side there, south to southeast, 10 to 15 knots. For tonight, again, that front really weakens. Precipitation field breaks up as it pushes inland. Areas of showers or light rain along that boundary really just tapering off there out toward the Yukon Delta coast. A little bit more moisture with this system pushing up toward the southwest coast toward morning. So periods of rain, gusty winds for the Alaska Peninsula. Rain changing to showers this evening for the eastern Aleutians. Fair over southern Alaska. Eastern interior dry and variably cloudy, mostly clear for the Panhandle. And for tomorrow, increasing moisture here over the southwest, and that shifts eastward into south central Alaska.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.